Hey, TTRPG world. Today we're going to talk about mazes, and adventure role-playing games. So, like many game runners, I am a armchair game designer, and once I had thought, wouldn't it be nice if there was a system where the classes mapped to the polyhedral dice? It makes total sense. There's these dice, there's these classes. You can kind of imagine higher up dice having more power, strength wise, or whatever. And lo and behold, there was a system that already did that. So this game by Chris O'Neill is powered by the polymorph system, and it does exactly what I described. Essentially the classes or your archetypes are tied to a dice, and you only roll that dice in the game, which is really unique. So I'm going to flip through the entire book. Professor Dungeon Master did a flip through of this I think a week or two ago. He has far more reach than I do. He does a great job of going over this, but I'm going to go a little bit more in detail. So hopefully I won't, tread too much water that he's already gone over. I'll include a link to that in the notes. This is just a fine book. It's got the two bookmarks here, and you can see that nice gold foil cover here. Very high quality book. This is done with love. Um, and it starts with a note from the author here and talks about a lot of this book also talks about um, role playing itself and some of the history of it. Starts off here doing that, and how this is not, again, right away responds to that question: is this Dungeons and Dragons? Uh, it is fantasy role playing, but it's not Dungeons and Dragons. So making that very clear to these new players. What do you need? All you need is your dice. Ninth level games does have unique mazes dice available. I don't have them for sale at the shop. And this would be a good opportunity to talk about Tabletop Bookshelf before I go any further. So, Tabletop Bookshelf is a small, independent, online only bookstore. We are really focused on the smaller publishers like Ninth Level Games, independent creators, and we want to support those publishers and those crowdfunded projects that they put out. And then also, hopefully, if you are a game runner or player, you can find something unique, and I think we offer some of the best deals out there. So give it a look. All right. So what is the world of mazes? And unlike other systems or other game books, this doesn't go into deep detail about the entire history of the world, but it does give you a sense of the tone, which I think is really important. You are dealing with a broken age. There's a darkness here. It's gritty. This is a swords and sorcery world. And it talks about some of it's mazes because a maze is a story with connected challenges, with choices. And that is the central part of this game. Is your character is negotiating these mazes. Doesn't have to be a literal maze, but there should be some sort of, there's these decision points, there's these connected places, there's discovery, and there are challenges. And then it talks about another deep philosophy here is the door to adventure. And I was wondering, what is this door? That's what it is. It's the door to adventure. It's really about getting the characters into the adventure as quick as possible. So you don't spend time on shopping trips. You don't do a lot of the downtime stuff. You pick your characters, and the maze controller places you at the door to adventure. So you're very quickly you are put into you are at the face you are at the entrance to this ancient tomb, and you can see the crumbling artifice of ancient kings, and there are little rats scurrying around. So it really brings you into that adventure point really quickly. And here we go. So here is the dice system. So you have your four dice. It only uses the first four for the classes, and it does this sort of wordplay thing. My role is my role. And this is something else that is hard to grasp just from looking at this book, but the writing here is great. There's a lot of little wordplay things that are going on, that you'll catch on to, and it's just there's just a clear grasp of the English language throughout. So the uh, the four roles here, there's the Paragon, the Vanguard, the Fighter, and the Sentinel, and you only ever roll your dice, like I said before. There are advantages and disadvantages, so that will be familiar to people who have played with that. 5e, you're rolling 2 dice instead of the 1 dice. And then the other thing that is important, it goes a little bit more into advantages, and then it says, let's just do it. Let's get into it, and let's roll the dice to get through the situations. So what are the resolutions? So again, there are not skills in this game per se. You are rolling based on what type of approach you are taking to the challenge. Are you going to take a bookish approach where you're using your mental powers, boots where you're using your quickness, blades where you're using your force or your attacks, or bones where you are trying to resist something? And the way that these tests work is that for each challenge, there's a certain roll that needs to be made. So if you want to do a book check, you've got to roll a 2 or a 3. This is very easy for the Paragon class because they have a D4. So they are going to be getting a success on books at least 50% of the time. But what this also means is that something interesting here, if you look at this, to get a success on bones roll, you need a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So that you may think, oh my gosh, so a Paragon is never going to succeed on a bones roll. Well, that is true, except for the fact that there are keys and crowns. So keys, whenever you roll a 1, that is your key bonus. And a key allows you to take a success if you can describe how your class or aspect grants you that success. So the key is an opportunity for success. So even on this bones roll, if a mage a Paragon rolling the D4 needed to make a bones roll, if they rolled a 1 and they could describe how their class or aspect succeeded against, let's say, being, I don't know, falling into a vat of acid, then they could succeed. Again, here's that wordplay again, rolls and rules. Goes into more detail, and it tells you, again, this is for the player. If you want to play this type of character, this is what you want to do. There are these nice little like hand-drawn sketch illustrations throughout. I really appreciate this. Is just full of character here. Resources in the game. So one thing that's interesting is that there's not a traditional initiative mechanic that you may be more familiar with. Everyone has a moment, and you can only it go in order. People take their moment or they pass their moment, and you can't take another moment until everyone else has taken a moment. So this is a really great system. Shadow Dark, for instance, uses this sort of system. I play my Blades in the Dark games like this, where I just say, I go through the list of players and I say, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing in this situation? And I find it to be a way more engaging way of playing the game, and also just keeps the flow going. Stars are your ability to do magic. Essentially, they allow you to they are a currency that you can spend, and that you can see that the Paragon has more stars, the Sentinel only has 1, to affect the narrative. And this is it's a really clever, because that's kind of an abstraction of what magic is. Essentially, it is a way to use an in-game currency to manipulate the narrative of the story. But this opens it up to all the other players, so you could use your star on your Sentinel ability and use it to describe some sort of amazing defensive maneuver you make. There is a darkness mechanic in this game, so that is something that is really important to keep track of, because as the darkness goes up as you roll crowns, so on the opposite side of keys are crowns. So if you roll the highest value on your die, that is going to be a failure in a lot of circumstances, but it will depend on the darkness. And so this is your way to kind of up the risk and introduce that risk versus reward mechanic as players go through their adventure. The other mechanic that I love is that there are flashbacks in this game. So you can spend a star and you can increase the darkness to do a flashback, which, if you've played Blades in the Dark, you describe something that happened in the past and you say, I prepared for this situation, I knew this was going to happen, so I have XYZ in my boot. It's a lot of fun, especially once players get a handle on it. Treasure is easy to track in the system. You're not tracking individual gold. Again, this game is not about tracking resources. It's about getting players into the action and making interesting choices. So instead, there is an abstract treasure and wealth, and you can use that treasure during the adventure to say that you have a certain item, a magic item or mundane item or otherwise. So again, that's a really great way of keeping it simple. Conditions. So there's not a ton of conditions in this game. There's not like, paralyzed, sleeping, dizzy, whatever. Instead, there are the 4 sort of damage levels, and then as you get to downed, you can either be healed from downed, or there's a death's door mechanic, which is great if you've played Darkest Dungeon. It's similar, except that the player gets to decide if they want to knock on death's door. And it's a great way for the character to say, well, I'm going to try to have a dramatic moment where I get up, or my character may perish. I may have to roll a new one. So that really adds this fun mechanic. And your character death is a big part of this game. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And here it does talk about what happens on that death's door roll. If you roll a 1, death takes you. And again, you're only rolling your dice. So if you are a sentinel, you have a much better chance of succeeding on death's door. But 1 in 10 is still likely to happen. So in addition to your dice, you pick your aspect, and this is how you want to solve problems. It's sort of the flavor of how you solve the problem. Before it was kind of the mechanics. This is more of the flavor that's on top of it, and it breaks down into the standard 3 swords and sorcery archetypes, which are the fighter, the rogue, and the mage or the sorcerer, the magic user. So are you going to use swords, shadows, or sorcery? And again, you use these aspects when you roll a key, for instance, or when you spend a star. It gives you examples of what that would look like, and it gives you some of the classes that line up with that. So the classes is based on your aspect, and it's like a special type of edge. And they talk a little bit about the different types of edges that are available, but I want to get to and there is your lineage too. So if you have these ideas of, oh, I want to play an elf, that's very much available. There is an advanced system, so XP is handled, you're not tracking individual experience points, but as you level up, you can get advanced edges. There are nice little interludes. There are nice little stories within it that set the tone of the world again and the type of adventures that will be played. Wonderful bookmark ribbons, 2 of them, black one and a gold one. So creating the character here, this is what you're going to want to flip to for your players on your session 0. Again, it rolls through. How do I want to enter the maze? I am a seeker of knowledge. I want to stay in the heart of the action. I hit with my sword. I want to keep everyone safe. So again, allowing your players to pick their role and their role. Now you have this great class list for each of the aspects. And these are example classes, so you can roll your own very easily using one of these as a template. And then there's a lot of classes, which I love. I love having lots of different classes for your characters to think about. It helps encourage their imagination. It's also a window into the world. And each class has a full page description, which I just love. Gives you a sense of what might be driving them, gives you some names, gives you a kit to start with, so it gives you some starting equipment. Again, getting you into the action quick. And there are, ones that you wouldn't see necessarily, like the Jaded Sellsword you might see, but the Haunted Librarian, that's not in a lot of 5e. So that's cool. Another interlude. Now magic. Magic in this game is really cool too. So there is a elemental system, and it's not the traditional 4 elements, that that a lot of systems try to fall onto. Instead, there is sky, sea, forge, earth, and night, and they show the interaction between the two. So if you wanted to counter sea, you would use a sky because sky rules over the sea. If you wanted to counter a forge spell, you'd use sea because sea washes away the forge. So a good way of thinking about that. Now, layered on top of elements, there are also schools. So you, in addition to these domains, there are also schools. So you have different ways of approaching your magic and combining your magic. So I'm going to conjure sky, or I'm going to abjure sky. Illumination, enchantment. A lot of these kind of do double duty. So illumination is both divination and feigning, which would be, traditional illusions. Evocation, summoning, and then they give you examples of spells. So this is helpful for if you are coming from D&D or some other system. What does a flight spell look like in the system? What does thunderclap look like in the system? But it gives you some also interesting ideas that aren't in 5e. Like, let's see, where's a good one? Rusting touch. There are rust spells, but not quite like that. A block of ice. So just lots of it. Again, giving you these are just examples. You have the ability as a player to create your own spells, whatever they may be. There's a lot of them. Lot of good examples to think through, and then giving you a list here for quick reference and some lineage spells or lineage magic. Then at the end, you get your maze controller section. So this is similar to your, this is your GM's guide of the section, your DM's guide. But in this game, it's the maze controller. And this is based on the idea of an MC, because some games have started to use that term MC. And again, this is another example of that great wordplay. He's using MC in repetition here to talk about what the maze controller does, what his roles are. You are the maze controller. You are the master of ceremonies. You are the maze creator. You build the world. You should never be the main character. You are the minor characters. You are the monsters and challenges. MC. So again, great writing. It's easy to read through, and it talks too about this is a swords and sorcery game. It's not the traditional high fantasy. The characters are not necessarily heroes. They might just be treasure hunters. And they talk about keeping it weird, which is great. Opening up your imagination to opening up your game to different angles of play. And then here we go. And then there is one final interlude before it goes on to the hazards. And this talks about some of the challenges that the players face. So this gives you some good examples. There's even a book of hazards at the end here with this just great picture. Look at that. And again, very simple way. So this is also helpful for, I think, for your maze controllers, your game runners, to look at this and say, this is all I need. This is all I need to have a back alley brute show up in the back. The other thing too about this game that's important that I totally forgot to mention is that the maze controller is never rolling dice. Only the players are rolling the dice in this game. So when you're seeing, that's another reason why these stat blocks can be so simple. All you have here is your threat level and your hearts on this. So this is how much, how many hearts this brute has before they're downed. And if you failed against your save against that, so a game or the maze controller may call for a save. If you fail against that save, and again, you would choose how you're going to do that save. You're going to use books, boots, blades, or bones. And if you fail, that might be the damage you take. Lots of good examples here. Some of them are inspired by, D&D, but not exactly like D&D. So it gives you some ideas of how you can sort of approach challenges that maybe your players have faced, but give them a twist. Yeah. And then to end the game here, there's the part 6 here talks about if you wanted to bring in things from other games, like for instance, I have Basic Fantasy Roleplaying, which is a great resource. If I wanted to pull anything in there into the system, it gives you a way to do that. We have talks a little bit more on that conversion idea. Gives some examples of safety warnings, which I think are important, especially for game maze controllers, game runners who are playing with groups you are not familiar with, not high trust groups. And then at the end is your appendix with all your inspiration for this game. And I look at this and I think, man, there is so much that I have to read. At the end, of course, gives you some example character sheets. And really, this is it, right? Like, these are the rules that you need to run the game. So you can flip to the back here and get a sense of what you're doing. And the character sheets themselves all have this success written out. So again, this game is designed to be easy for people who haven't played RPGs to pick up and play. Lovely game. Beautiful book. Can't wait to run through some mazes with my players. Well, thank you. This book is on for sale at Tabletop Bookshelf. I'll include a link in the description below. Check it out, and happy gaming.